I'm going to be talking about Halloween 1978, considered a classic film by many, especially in the particular genre of slasher film. And with the new movie coming out too, 40 years later, they're making a direct sequel to Halloween. Now, this will be the 11th installment of the film. It won't be connected to any of the spin offs and sequels. So, this movie is significant for a number of reasons. One of them being this is Jamie Lee Curtis's acting debut, and they advertise her as someone who's going to be a big star in a way. You kind of get that feeling, especially with the opening scene where you have the title cards and a really unique shot too. I think the camera is a wide shot and it starts slowly pushing into a jack-o'-lantern. I always like to put myself in the position of moviegoers of the time. Try to put out of my mind what I already know about Michael Myers, the main antagonist in this movie who goes around killing people. Even people who aren't fans of this particular style of movie will know the name, or at least have seen the character. He's considered an iconic pop culture icon in the world of horror. I mean, you see the mask, you see the jack-o'-lantern with the knife with the classic movie poster. Another thing that the movie introduces with the title cards in the opening scene is the iconic Halloween theme song, also composed by the director John Carpenter. So while this is considered a classic in the slasher film genre, it isn't really the first that has tackled this sort of style of film. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas actually was a movie cited by John Carpenter that he was inspired by to create this style of movie. But in a cinematic sense though, it's very unique and it lays the groundwork for other movies that came out like this. And it's one of the most commercially successful independent films. So clearly I'm sure at the time felt like they struck gold with this style of movie. And that's evident in a lot of the movies that came out afterwards. Friday the 13th comes out a few years later and other movies kind of follow suit. And they sort of arguably spin off into obscurity over the years, remakes, those types of things. You could take or leave them. Being such a horror movie fan, I've seen many of them. They're not the best films. I'll still check them out, have some popcorn and have fun with it. This movie has had such a big influence that to consider that the 11th installment of this sort of universe that was created is happening is, I think, a testament to how popular it's been over the years. So dialing it back now, trying to put all of my knowledge of this series in the past behind me and just looking at the movie for what it is and when it came out in this particular time in 1978. Well, first of all, the movie opens in a very peculiar way. You are seeing through the point of view through a character's eyes, and there's heavy breathing, and already you know there's something not right. And this character goes through the drawers of the kitchen and pulls out a knife, and you're like, okay, I think I know where this is going. The movie has started with some ominous music, still through the point of view of this character, goes up to the second level and ends up murdering someone. And this is very shocking, I think, especially if you're a first-time viewer. And what makes it even doubly shocking is as the character goes outside and the camera turns around and we see a child. And we're now introduced to Michael Myers as a kid. And I can only imagine how shocking that must have been for audiences to know that the killer who did that was a child. 1968 was the year when the movie started, when he was a child, and now it's 1978, so you're flash forward to 10 years. You see him escape from an insane asylum and make it back to his hometown. Michael Myers, you would think, is just some serial killer that just gets away. He happens to break out of the insane asylum and go to the town. But it turns out he's actually more than that. He's perhaps, some theories suggest he's the embodiment of evil. You can't get rid of him. He's around. You can probably, fend him off, but he always somehow ends up back at your doorstep, stalking someone, killing someone. Talking about some of the deaths in this movie, I think Nancy, one of Laurie's friends, gets it pretty bad when she's in the car. These are one of the moments in these films where I get kind of cringy, like, oh gosh. And I think it's because they stayed on this shot for a little bit longer as Michael Myers is choking her. And I think it's partly because of the acting is so good. I'm not sure if they're going for a dark comedy route on this, but she goes cross-eyed when she dies. So I don't know if they were saying hey, you're supposed to laugh at this. One interesting note about his costume, his origin story is all in this movie. He breaks into a hardware store and Sheriff Brackett of the town, his daughter and Laurie drive up and say, what's going on over there? Well, it turns out some teenagers broke into the store and the alarm was going off. but we all know as a viewer that that was probably Michael Myers. The mask of Michael Myers is of Captain Kirk from Star Trek. One of the production designers, Wallace, I believe his name is, he cut the eyes out just to be a little bit more wider and painted the face more white. Another thing with this movie, as you're watching it, it has all the 70s cheesy production elements. You have sound effects. It's throughout this whole movie. And with that, it's hard to take seriously, but then again, I don't know, I'm not so sure if the movie itself really takes itself seriously. It's pretty fascinating that they finished this film in 1 year. 20 days worth of shooting, that's pretty amazing that they were able to pull all this off. Partly because I think the Steadicam was introduced and they were able to have these longer shots with wide shots. You'll notice a lot of these swooping shots that show the neighborhood and the characters walking in a very seemingly quiet town, and the camera follows them. And it's very steady, and this was kind of a new thing that John Carpenter wanted to use, and I think that also made it easier to create this film in such a short amount of time. What's really frightening to me in movies is when you have a setting where it doesn't look like a scary place. It's a place you wouldn't imagine something bad would happen, a person coming to town and terrorizing the neighborhood. And for me, it's especially scary on a personal level because I grew up in a small town here in California. And when I was growing up, there was always this excitement to Halloween, the day of. It was hard to sleep the night before because I was so excited about Halloween happening the next day. And, you know, you see scenes of kids going trick-or-treating and, you know, leaving school, and there's this weird excitement. And I think that movie kind of captured that for me too, and that's why I've especially liked the setting of this movie. This was supposed to take place in the fall, and the plot in a particular Midwest town, but it actually was shot in LA. It was a different season too. It was in the springtime they shot it. So it was really neat to see how they try to make it seem like this Midwest fall, autumn setting. They even went as far as to paint leaves different colors on the ground. The dialogue isn't groundbreaking. There's nothing to write home about when it comes to what's being said. There are some classic lines though. For example, when Laurie, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, is walking, all of a sudden Sheriff Brackett, the sheriff of the town, is right behind her and bumps into her. And it's kind of like a cheap scare moment. One of the classic lines is, you know, it's Halloween, everyone's entitled to a scare. And I think that's overall like the theme of what the filmmakers are trying to do to the audience is just scare them. So if you haven't seen Halloween, especially before this sequel that's coming up soon, by the time this comes out, it may be out. I don't think you'll be disappointed, especially if you like horror films and slasher films. It's one of those movies you're just gonna sit back, relax, maybe have a drink or two, some popcorn, and just kind of go along for the ride. I don't think it really needs a deep dive analysis too much on the plot itself. If you want to see the origins of this classic character, Michael Myers, you can check it out, and you won't be disappointed.